Welcome back to me and my prop door. I don't know really how to start this, so I think we're just gonna dive right into it. This is going to be Maddie's story. Let me scooch over. So a little over 2 weeks ago, on the 26th of February, Maddie and her brother came into the rescue. Now, when they came into the rescue, they looked like normal kittens, but the information that we had received was that there were only 2 surviving kittens out of 6. And actually, as the finder was bringing the kittens to us, there were actually 3. And the 3rd one just didn't make the ride over from the finder's house. So on the 26th, 2 little kittens came into the rescue, and immediately we began intake on them. These guys overall felt okay, but you could definitely tell that they were sick. They had crusty little eyes and crusty little noses. And as we started to try to stimulate them and get them hydrated and get them warm, we realized that both of these guys had huge bladders. It's really hard to tell in this video, but essentially you can see that we're outlining the actual bladder itself. It was probably this big all the way around. It was massive. Bladders can actually explode, and it can actually be a cause of death for kittens. There's a high likelihood that the other kittens who passed, that was the cause, but we don't know. We don't know the answer to that question. We just know we had Maddie and Marvin, and they both had severely distended bladders. We were able to relieve them through a technique called cystokinesis, which means essentially using a sterile technique method, we inserted a needle into their bladder and pulled out a huge sample of urine. It was very clear right from the bat that these guys had a urinary tract infection, a UTI, which could have come from mom because she had an upper respiratory infection. Upper respiratory infection, she licks and cleans her babies, they get that infection. So that was day 1. We got them warm, we got them fed, and we got their bladders expressed. And we also started them on an antibiotic, which for a UTI is essential. Do you want to come in? We have a party. Come on. Okay. Great. If you're gonna come in, you have to be on camera. Show them your face. Aussie doesn't like to be held, but Britta does not mind. Britta, can you show them your face? She doesn't. She's like, I'm not your little dog and pony show. So we got them in on a Sunday, so the next day on a Monday, we took them into the vet to have them assessed. Obviously they were sick, but we wanted to make sure that we were doing everything right, and we came up with a plan moving forward. Our vet agreed that 1, yes, these guys had a urinary tract infection and an upper respiratory infection, and they agreed with us starting them on the antibiotic that we did. They also were pretty surprised at how difficult the bladder was to express, meaning that we couldn't, meaning how difficult it was to get urine out of the bladder by helping them pee. And that just goes to show you that they were really blocked up. So all that being said, when we left the vet, we had a plan, and I felt really good going into the next 2 weeks of their quarantine to get them happy, healthy, and all the good stuff. Well, when I got home, little Marvin was he was listless, and you could just tell that he was in pain. He was uncomfortable, and even though it's likely that we knew what was going on, at this point we were pretty certain it was a urinary tract infection. In every instance in the world of animal welfare, you absolutely have to think about what is best for that kitten or that animal. And in this case, it was not humane to keep little Marvin going just for the sake of hoping that maybe he would make it. So basically, a few minutes after getting home to the vet with Marvin, I took one look at him and I was like, this is not fair. This is not humane. And I took him right back to the vet, where we all agreed that it was actually probably best to go ahead and humanely euthanize him. Those are always difficult decisions to go through, because you never want to euthanize something that is still fighting, or euthanize something that still has a chance, or euthanize something that isn't necessarily in pain. Or in our case, we don't have to euthanize for space, so that's never a concern for us. So having to make those difficult decisions is not a fun one, I will say, and it's not something that I take very lightly. You really have to think about what's best for the animal, what their current state is, and what is the likelihood that they're gonna make it past. Because sometimes they'll be in discomfort, but we can see the light at the end of the tunnel, essentially. And for this, I just didn't know. So that's that. Rescue sometimes comes with really shitty decisions, but overall, it's what was best for our sweet little boy, Marvin. So then there was just Maddie. Over the next 2 days, she seemed to be doing better, at least peeing wise. The girlfriend could pee on her own. It was wonderful. It was glorious. But her upper respiratory infection seemed to be getting worse. So that means it was not responding to the antibiotics we had her on, and so we took her straight back to the vet. The vet put her on a stronger antibiotic and gave her some other things to kind of help with that upper respiratory infection. We got her in the incubator where she was on oxygen and she was on temperature and humidity controlled spots. What? And at this point, it is important to note that she was tube feeding. Actually, she exclusively tube fed the entire time that she was with us. She never really took to the bottle at all. Not because she wasn't hungry. I think she just associated me trying to put something in her mouth with being the tube, and she did not like the tube. So if I tried the bottle, she didn't want the bottle. Anyway, that's not the point. The point was she started to improve tremendously. She was a whole new kitten. She was doing great, but her eyes started to look like they had what are called ulcers or some injuries to her eyes. And while she was still healing or in the early process of healing, I wanted to make sure we addressed that so her eyesight could be saved, hopefully. So we did a follow-up with the vet. They agreed. She was looking great. She was feeling great. She was doing a lot better. And we went on ahead and switched her from a different antibiotic to help address the eye situation, because the other antibiotic we had her on was associated sometimes with risk to their eyes, essentially. So we switched her to a different antibiotic. She's still on tube feeding. I was like, great, we're golden. The one thing that was a little odd is her temperature was 97 degrees, but I kind of attributed that to the fact that she wasn't in her incubator. We had taken her out of that. She was on a heating pad at the vet's office, but that's not the same as the incubator. And girlfriend always struggled to keep her temperature up. So I didn't think too much of that. The vet was a little bit concerned. She just made sure that she was on some type of heating source at home. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Of course. What do you think I'm running here? Who do you think I am? But yeah, that was the only thing that was odd. So then on the 11th, little Maddie took a turn, and I mean, she went from the night before being her happy-go-lucky self. I think I did a TikTok live with her. I took lots of pictures of her because she was just like looking good. She was starting to walk around. She was just doing great, and I was like, hell yeah, baby, we are doing the thing. But then the next morning at 5 a.m. everything changed. She had labored breathing, she was panting, and I had no idea what was going on. I immediately wanted to take her to the emergency vet, and maybe in hindsight, I should have, but I decided that I would wait and text our vets in a few hours and just see if she's improving, see if I can get them any more information and see what they thought. So when I spoke with our vets, I said, hey, this is what's going on, what do you think? And they were like, okay, let's restart the other antibiotic and just keep a really close eye on her and let us know what or if she improves. So she didn't really improve too much, but she didn't really get worse over the next few hours. So between the time that I spoke with the vets, which was about noon, and noon the next day, she was about the same. But there were some things that at the time I didn't think too much of, but looking back, which are now on our growing list of things to look out for when taking care of a tiny, teeny, fragile thing. She began to rapidly gain weight, and I mean rapidly. This girl had the most difficult time putting on weight. She started at 149 grams on the first day she came in, which was the 26th, and then by the 9th, she had only gotten up to 230 grams. It was a steady increase, but it was very slow. Sorry, it was getting a little heavy. We need a break. Okay, sorry. By the time she started with her rapid breathing to the time that she passed, she gained about 50 grams. And when it first started, I was like, oh my gosh, okay, we're turning in the right corner, we're moving in the right direction, she's gaining weight, so great, I think we're moving past things. But by the next day, I was like, this is a lot of weight. This doesn't seem right. And so on the 12th, as she continued to gain weight, her stomach began to bloat, and she just had this fragile feeling about her. It's so difficult to explain what that feels like, but normally you have a very thick kitten. It's got quite the build, like they feel solid. They're just like this chunk of little baby fluff. But she felt like a fragile little bird that was super delicate and could basically just turn into dust in my hands. It's hard to explain without actually feeling it. She also, her gums went from pink just a few hours ago to totally pale. And all of that taken together, I thought, oh my God, we need to get her to the ER vet right now. So I dropped everything, I took her to the ER vet, and she passed on the way up to the ER vet. That's not where our story ends though, because this is what is probably the most important thing to me, aside from actually rescuing and being able to adopt these kittens, is if we do have a kitten pass in our care, I like to know why. Because that's the way that we learn, that's the way we improve, that's the way we do better. So for little Maddie, I made the decision to go ahead and get a necropsy done with our vet. I can go in the middle now because I'm not going to show you that. But during the necropsy, I was able to watch, and essentially what had happened is her intestines, her little large and small intestine, had shut down. And so it wasn't moving food through. Sorry about that. Aussie, oh my God, she's going right back in it. So her small and large intestines. Oh my God. On the necropsy, it looked like her large and small intestines essentially just shut down. And so food that was going into her stomach wasn't being, it was being digested, and then it was just not being run through her small and large intestine so that her body could absorb nutrients. So she wasn't getting any nutrients. Her belly was just bloating because it was just filling and filling and filling with stuff, but it never left, which was really unfortunate to see. But at the same time, at the end of that, I had a discussion with our vet, and I learned that there are some things that we could potentially do if that were to happen again. If I were to see this rapid weight gain and this listlessness and this feel of a kitten and the heavy breathing, that's something that we can try. There's something we can do. There's something maybe we could implement at the last minute, a nice little Hail Mary, a Hail Maddie, if you will, and try to get them past that spot. So that is Maddie's story, and we can't forget about Marvin. Like I said, Maddie and Marvin each had their own unique side of rescue, all whittled into one little story. The difficult decision of when it's not humane to continue to fight for an animal, and then the other side where you fought for this animal fought and gave you every sign that they were improving and getting better, just for them to take a quick turn and pass before you're able to really do anything about it, essentially. But even in that instance, we can learn something, and for me, that's the most important thing. I don't deal with animal death in the way that I think a lot of people do. I'm very much a how can we learn something from this animal that is going to help future animals, rather than kind of getting stuck in the sadness and the sorrow. Don't get me wrong, I was very sad about the whole situation. It sucked, I hated it. And at the same time, it can be true that I'm grateful we were able to figure out what went wrong, so that way, if this happens in the future, we can deal with it. And I also wanted to note, scooch over here, I also wanted to note, when I started thinking about it, little Maddie, her symptoms were very similar to Cardi and Camilla. If you guys remember Cardi and Camilla, they were here a very long time ago. They did not make it, but their brother, Mr. Worldwide, did. And we never figured out what went wrong with them. Their symptoms and her symptoms matched side by side, but I was never to get a necropsy done on them because I didn't store their bodies right after they had passed, so we weren't able to look at that. But with Maddie, I did, and we were able to see. So now moving forward, when that happens again, because it's gonna happen again, we will be able to do something about it. And also, Cardi and Camilla, if you guys are still pretty new here, this is where Heck and Chomps came from. Cardi and Camilla started the whole Heck and Chomp saga. They are the queens of Heck and Chomps. Okay, not to be espresso depresso, but that is Maddie and Marvin's story. That's the whole timeline. That's from when they came in to when they passed and everything in between. I am pretty sad about the start of this kitten season. There have already been a lot of casualties, and I think it's gonna be a rough year, but hopefully we can learn a lot, and I'm always glad to take you guys on the journey with us. So thank you for being here. I love and appreciate you. And a reminder, the Screamies are coming up. Whenever we get in cases like Maddie, it's not free to treat them, and the Screamies is our annual fundraiser, our annual fundraiser. that we do every single year to help us raise funds for our kittens. You can either become a monthly donor and be part of our kitten club, which you'll be getting some fun little perks in the mail, or you can do a one-time donation, which is just as equally as awesome and we are super grateful for. Anything helps, and if you're not able to donate, that's totally fine. Just consider sharing and liking all of our stuff, because that is also what helps us get in front of new eyes and new faces who can learn about rescue and what we do and support us along the way. So anyway, love you, appreciate you, I hope all is well, and I will see you on the next one. Goodbye.